method of research in history and local and oral history among BA history students at PUP. He finished the degree Bachelor of Arts in History and thereafter pursued Master of Arts in Asian Studies at the UP Asian Center. He has likewise done researches like labor policies and measures during the Japanese occupation, compulsory labor, and the mining industry during the Japanese occupation, of culturalism and dynastic decline, the collapse of imperial China, and the evolution of the school curriculum in the Philippines. Among his researches, he has already presented the following in the national and international conferences: the Japanese occupation of Ilocos Norte, ang fotografiya bilang bati sa pagsulat ng kasaysayan, ang paglaganap at gamit ng fotografiya mula Kolonyang Kastila tungo Okupasyong Amerikano, the use of photography in understanding the late 19th century Philippines locality, the BA History program of the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, its historical development and future, which he co-presented with Dr. Amalia Rosales, videos in the 19th century through selected photographs and implementing public order through the Clavera Decree of 1849. In May 2017, he was one of the participants in SHED-sponsored second generation training of trainers and readings in Philippine History or RIPH, a member of various professional organizations. He has conducted trainings on the teaching of readings in Philippine history. So wag kayong mahiya kay sir, mahilig mag-entertain ng tanong yan. So mamaya after all throughout or habang nagdi-discuss siya, pwede kayo magbati ng questions dan. So again, I present to you Professor McDonald Domingo Pascual from PUP. Hi sir.
Hello. Thank you, Sherrenne, for that kind introduction. Good afternoon to all of us, to the organizers of this BINALOT talk, especially to Ms. Ana Pineda and Ara Espigar, both University Research Associates of the UP Archaeological Studies Program, for inviting me to discuss on photography and history. Of course, to Ms. Sherrenne Amboy, my former student and now colleague at the Department of History of PUP, who initiated this invitation. I am indebted, Ma'am Sherrenne, and of course, all of the participating members of the audience in this webinar. It is my honor and privilege actually to be a part of this BINALOT series of talks of the UP ASP. I'd like to share my PowerPoint presentation. Okay, can you see it?
Yes sir.
The role of photography in history by yours truly. And this comes out of the instructional material that I developed concerning historiography, or the use of visual images in history. My professor on ancient and medieval Europe and modern and contemporary Europe, the late Ambassador Adelfa Centeno Kaugma, used to say that a picture can capture a part of eternity. True indeed, because each photograph preserves what is recorded in it, although what is in it may not be easily understood at the specific context of an event. This is because photographs situate what is in them in entirely different milieus. In 1921, Frederick R. Barnard used the phrase, look is one look is worth 1,000 words," in the advertising journal called Printer's Ink. The phrase came with this idea that the use of images is more effective in advertisements. The phrase, which was originally enunciated in the instructional talk given by Arthur Brisbane, a newspaper editor, to the Syracuse Advertising Men's Club in March 1911, means that a photograph can inform a story just as well as 1,000 of words. True enough, photographs can depict many stories about people, events, and the surroundings, just what you can see in our screen. These stories that were capsulized in still visual forms evoke memories and emotions, good or bad, as they recreate significant human experiences of the past. These significant human experiences of the past usually linger around people because they constitute the unforgettable recollections of narratives which embody sentimental and cherished value. In history, the significant human experiences which are vital to the identity and character of a society are worthy to rekindle and learn. Photographs which confine them serve as potent sources or pieces of evidence. For the sake of this discussion, let us ask the questions. First, what is the role played by photographs in the study of history? And second, how should photographs be used as sources of history? Before we proceed to the gist of this presentation,
Sir, excuse me po.
yes,
Pwede daw pong medyo lakasan niyo po yung audio. Naka-mic ka po ba, sir?
yes. Okay, how about now? Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
better.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Before we proceed to the gist of this presentation, allow me to discuss briefly the introduction of photography in the Philippines. Okay, yeah. All right. This is, by the way, the oldest photograph in the world called "View from the Window at Le Gras" by the French inventor Joseph Nips. In Europe, the struggle towards discovery and inventions have become evident since the period of the Renaissance. With the purpose of syncopating social life, inventions were pursued, which brought more and more changes to light in the 19th century, more particularly in the field of science and technology. And of course, it became also evident in the Philippines. Changes became evident also in the Philippines. Along with the changes was the invention of a representation through a device that uses light and shadow, the camera. A French named Joseph Nicephore Niepce is the inventor, or he was the one who invented the first camera actually, and he's the one with whom the making of the first permanent photographic images are usually credited. His obra maestra, called View from the Window at Le Gras, was the result of the photographic process he developed using what was called a camera obscure. To this day, the photo, which was either shot in 1827 or 1828, has been regarded as the oldest existing photo in the world. The death and failure of Nicephore's experiments prompted his associate Louis Daguerre, a French artist, to pursue and improve on the photographic process. This led to the invention of a visual recording device called the daguerreotype camera in 1839, and that became, of course, the prototype of what would be later on made as cameras. 2 years after its invention in Europe, the daguerreotype camera was introduced to the Philippines. The Spanish diplomat and traveler Sinibaldo de Mas, who was considered by many Spaniards as the spy of the King of Spain, was the first to introduce photography in the country in 1841, and therefore in our country he became the first photographer. Using his daguerreotype camera, he recorded the various conditions of the country and made recommendations concerning these conditions. Consequently, he was not welcome to many Spanish authorities, and he eventually experienced a shortage of money. Hence, he was forced to become a photographer from time to time to live in the colony. Unfortunately, none of his captured images were found. The following years saw the arrival of other European photographers in the country, such as the English, the Dutch, and the French. As a result, studios emerged, including the studios of Pedro Picon, W. W. Wood, Albert Honis, and Francisco van Camp. Although well-to-do families were their patrons rather, their studios also documented various activities and aspects of Filipino life, such as disaster experiences, events, forms of local industry or livelihood, local government offices, and various landscapes of the country. The Belgian Van Camp, who brought the studio of Albert Honis in 1875 and the studio of Francisco Vertiera in 1891, is known for his portraits of women and his documentation of the destruction of buildings in Manila and its neighboring provinces in 1880 due to a strong earthquake that hit the area, and of course the ravages of a strong typhoon in 1882. This is inside Intramuros, and at the foreground, this is where one can find the pamantasan ng lungsod ng Maynila, and then that street over there, that calle over there is the Calle General Luna at present, going towards the direction of Intramuros. In history, pictures are used as potent pieces of evidence. Oh, by the way, we have here the Cascos. I'm going to talk about the Cascos later on. They are considered as potent pieces of evidence because they depict representations of reality in exact, vivid images. As evidence, pictures which were developed and printed in the remote yesteryears are considered as primary sources because they directly and concretely show the images and events captured by the camera. The images themselves also serve as mechanisms which directly convey or relate the audience to the narratives contained in them. Using technology, the pictures become effective pieces of evidence in preserving the natural manifestations of the images or events caught by the camera. Why is it then that photographs or photography, for that matter, becomes very relevant in the study of history? First, photographs serve as recorders of the past. Photographs make episodes of history to seem more real than a mere description in a diary or by an eyewitness. In fact, it is more credible as it acts as a third-party element, usually conveying neutrality concerning its subject. Although they are also subjected to doubts in the same manner as historical records and artifacts are subjected to debates, old photographs were very credible as sources of historical information at a time when Photoshop and other editing applications were not yet available. The Cascos, for example, their appearances and sizes would be unknown to the present generation if there are no photographs that prove their existence. These flat-bottomed, square-ended, huge wooden boats sailed the Laguna de Bai, Rio de Pasig and its tributaries, and the Manila Bay, mostly carrying cargoes. The Cascos attested that in other countries, like in other countries in Southeast Asia, rivers were used as navigable channels of transportation and commerce in the 19th century in the Philippines. Due to the essential use of photographs in the study of history, photography has become a valuable aspect of historical documentation. Evidently, photography becomes a medium through which the untouched aspects of history investigated, and explored. For example, the lifeways of the ordinary men and women in Ilocos during the Spanish period would be observed and treated as equally important as the elite, whose lives and achievements have been dominating the written sources. With the existence of photographs, other perceptions of the periods of the respective subjects would be reconstructed. In this case, photography becomes an indispensable part of historiography. Now, um, okay. Next is photographs objectively relate narratives of the past. While it is true that photographs record past or parts of reality, rather, they too exude narratives of the past. Photographs effectively relate historical narratives through certain characteristics or factors as first, the ability of the photographs to convey historical facts. Second, the ability to convey the culture and prevailing practices of people during their periods of existence. Third, the ability to expand and reinforce knowledge about periods. And lastly, the ability to stimulate the people's interest in uh, their and imagination of history. The picture of what was used to be known as Malecon Drive, now the Bonifacio Drive in the city of Manila, which was taken around 1900, conveys historical facts. First, electricity had been introduced to the country, only that it was not yet used for the tramcars or the tranvías because the invention or the invitation for bidding regarding the establishment of electric streetcar system in the country took place in 1902. Again, I said that this picture was taken sometime in 1900. The electric-powered tranvías were seen in the thoroughfares of Manila starting in 1904 when the ownership of Compañía de los Tranvías de Filipinas was transferred to the Manila Electric Railroad and Light Company called Meralco from Jacobo Sobel and his associates. I learned that the surname Sobel is German, not Spanish. Sa makatuwid ang mga kable ng kuryente na inyong nakikita dito kasi merong kable ng kuryente, medyo malabo lang, no? Na inyong nakikita ay ginamit lamang upang ilawan ang waterfront promenade para sa kapakanan ng mga barkong paparating uh, uh, mula sa ibang lugar. Um, At syempre, hindi pa ito para sa mga tranviya na sa panahon na yan ay hinihila pa ng mga kabayo. At makikita ninyo mayroong truck dyan for the tranviya. Yan ay papunta sa may area ng Pasay at ang tranviya ay hinihila pa ng kabayo sa panahon na yan. And speaking of ships, there had been a harbor used by huge naval vessels in the Philippines during the American period. Okay, yan. So you can see the facility, no, over there. Okay, and then here is a picture coming from the area or the direction of what we know as Anda Circle. So ito yung binabanggit natin na harbor. Okay. At ito naman, no, yung nasa left, kung kaharap nyo yung screen ninyo, that is the electric-powered tranvia owned by Meralco. Ulit, no, Meralco means Manila Electric Railroad and Light Company. Railroad kasi talaga ang unang business ng Meralco, no, involving the tramcars. At ito naman, sa kanan ay ang horse-drawn na tranvia. Okay. Now, this photo shows the Philippine General Hospital, which was flooded due to a strong typhoon in September 1942. 1914. The photo tells the fact that the hospital has been flooded since 1914. Moreover, upon seeing the photo, the prevailing practices of people in their periods become observable. Anong ginagawa nila sa panahon na yan kapag ka uh, pagbaha, either gumagamit ng pangka o di naman kaya balsa. Pero hanggang tuhod lang naman pala no, yung baha sa katapat ng Philippine General Hospital. Okay. This observation on the part of the audience leads to the crystal clear confirmation on whether Manila was flooded in the colonial times or not. Kasi may mga nag-iisip na, kakaunti pa lang ang mga tao noon, no? Baka hindi pa binabaha kasi wala pang pagbaha ang mga, wala pang pagbara no? uh, ng plastic halimbawa sa mga estero. Okay. Pero meron ng pagbaha as you can see in the picture. Okay, accordingly, knowledge about periods is widened and reinforced, and interest and imagination of the people about history would be deliberately stimulated. Third, photographs reveal social demographics. Okay? Yan. Okay, ito nagre-reveal din po ito ng narrative. Ano yung kwento? Okay, dito kita mo sa baba, magkakaibigan pa yung mga Filipino at American soldier, but later on, no, nakita mo magkalaban na sila as the American soldiers prepared for war against their Filipino counterparts. No? Ito yung sa Battle of Diliman. Okay. Photographs reveal social demographics. Yeah, indeed, photographs disclose various types of people from various social strata at certain periods. The colonial fashion of the Ilocanos are different from those of the Maranaos in Mindanao, even at the time of the Spanish period. The experiences of children can be seen differently. Yan, kita natin yung sa left side, yung picture ni si Worcester, kasama niya ang isang gurot. No? At makita mo dito yung power relationship ng dalawa. Yung isa ay mukhang frail, sickly, weak, no? At mas maitim at smaller. Therefore, it tells na siya ay mas mahina. At yung isa, mas malakas, mas sibilisado, and therefore, no, it justifies the presumption that the Americans had the right to govern the Philippines. At ito naman ay photo ng St. Louis Exposition noong 1904. Okay. The experiences of children can be seen differently when compared to adults. Makikita natin yan sa mga picture. Okay, halimbawa dito, no, kita mo the cigareras of Manila and their children. At makita mo, pati mga bata ay walang prevention sa paghit-hit ng tabako. There are other pictures showing na ang mga bata ay hindi pinagbabawalan na mag-puff ng tobacco. At kung titignan ninyo, no, ang lalaki ng mga tobacco na kanilang smoke. No? Yan. Okay. So photos, women can also be observed as inferior to men. I mean, sa pamamagitan, no? Through photos, sa pamamagitan ng mga picture, women can also be observed as inferior to men, or that the absence of their photos would give the impression of their disregard or their unnecessary involvement in the study of history. To heighten the concern and the importance of women in the society and in nation building, a course called Women in History has been offered in the academy. It must be remembered that the written accounts about history are dominated by men. With the presence of photographs about women showing them as leaders, warriors, and bearers of honor, however, deflate the myths about them as subordinates only to men. Accordingly, photographs can function as equalizers in the study of history. Okay, now this is another picture showing social demographics. No? Kita mo, ito yung unang boda, which was a picture taken by Felix Lauria, the first Filipino photographer in Panay. At pangmayaman ito kasi kapag ordinaryo lang, ay hindi sasakay sa carriage. No? Okay. And then we have here a photo of Calindiria, or what we call Calindiria, which could be found in the poblaciones of the island of Panay. So magkakaroon ka ng idea ng kung ano ba talaga ang Carinderia noong panahon na yan. Okay. And then, as I said, no, women are being highlighted, being emphasized. At the left side of the screen is Tekla San Andres Siga, the first Filipina to top the Philippine bar. And she topped the Philippine bar in 1930. And then, of course, you have Gloria Diaz, who brought honor to the Philippines in 1969 when she became Miss Universe. Okay. Yan. Ngayon, papaano ba sinusuri ang mga larawan? Okay. Let me use the acronym PHOTO. Yan. Alright. P stands for photograph, H for historical fact, O for observers, T for trust, O for other elements. Okay. Itong picture na nasa right side, makaka-relate dito ang mga participant from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. Kasi ito ay interior ng isang grocery store which is now occupied by Jollibee Santa Mesa. Okay? Yan. Now, let's talk about photograph. Okay? Which stands for the subject of the picture. Okay, when we say photograph, we ask the questions. What is the subject of the photograph? Does the photograph show its subject in the relief, or it shows another subject through a subtext or a concealed meaning? Nung panahon ng mga Spaniard, hindi gaano uso ang concealed meaning. Pero sa panahon ng mga Amerikano, naging uso ito, may subtext. No? Kasi lalo pa at ginamit ang mga photograph para i-report yung kondisyon ng Pilipinas at para mabigyan lalo ng justification ang mga Amerikano na pamahalaan ang ating bansa. When was the photograph taken? Kasi para ma-ascertain natin na authentic talaga yung photograph. And does the photograph contribute to a better understanding of its period? Okay. Next is H, which stands for historical facts. Alright. Kung titignan ba natin, halimbawa, ang itsura ng mga bus na ito, no, ng mga establishmento na nandito, ng poste, ng mga kawad ng kuryente, hindi ba ito ay historical fact, no, noong kanyang panahon? And therefore, we are given a better understanding about the period. In other words, when we say historical fact, we mean the absence of doubt, the absence of uncertainty. In other words, hindi natin ito pagdidebatehan unless na ang picture na ito ay subject sa editing or tampering. Kasi even in the 18th century, for example, in the 19th century in the US, ay na-edit manually ang mga picture. And I'll show you an example of a photograph which was edited manually and considered fake by many historians. Other questions that we need to ask are, can these facts be verified by other independent primary sources? In history, when we say independent primary source, this is the kind of source which was not influenced by another source in terms of conveying what it witnessed or what it claims as something to be true. Do the facts strengthen perception or knowledge its period? And lastly, is the photograph credible as a source of historical information? We can only ascertain the credibility of a certain source in history if there is a consistency of its reliability. Okay? At ito po ay picture ng Quezon Boulevard heading to Quezon City from the direction of downtown. No? Kuha ito noong 1950s. At dito sa left side, kita mo yung Quiapo Church. Okay. At yan. No? Okay. Okay. At ito naman ay yung protracted na nandoon sa bandang dulo. Okay. Yan. So kita mo yung mga jeep, no? This is another picture. Kita mo yung mga older type na jeep. Uh, ay the same lang din naman dito. Yung mga bus ay the same din lang naman dito. So what more do you have to prove? Okay. And of course, the observers. The questions are, who are the supposed observers of the photograph para malaman natin kung may bias din yung photographer, no, sa kanyang pagkuha ng larawan. Saan ba niya kasi ito gagamitin? Kanino ba niya ito ipapakita? And second, is the photo intended solely for an observer or a group of observers? Okay. Kita ninyo, no? Ito ay sa Rio de Pasig before it became so polluted. Alright. Okay. Now, next, yan, trusts or objectives. In terms of the trust, why the picture was captured or taken, we need to ask who is the photographer? Where did he come from? What is his career or educational background? Does the photograph emphasize or focus on a particular image? What elements emphasize or focus uh, the image? And next, who or where is the source of the photograph? Bakit kaya halimbawa sa kanya galing or bakit naitago niya at hindi niya kaagad pinakita na tinago niya ito ng more than 4 decades. No? Hindi man lang ito na-publish or hindi man lang ito. No? All of these things, all of these factors would affect the credibility of the source. Kaya kailangan tanungin natin ang mga bagay na ito. For how long was it kept by that source or by that what the lawyers call custody of the source? What are the intentions of the photographer in capturing the photograph? And lastly, are there some indications of the photographer's bias or discrimination in favor of or against the subject in the photograph? Okay. Now, these two photos are very interesting because it tells of a narrative, the story of a boy named Tita Pete. No? He was this man 9 years later, and um, he was the same person dito sa pangatlong picture na to, who came to be known by the Christian name Hilary Clapp, who studied in Baguio, Canada. I think he studied high school in Canada and then in Manila, his medical degree in Manila. He completed his medical degree at UP. He became the first Igorot doctor. He went back to Bontoc in 1922 and worked in the province's district hospital since 1924. In World War II, he was appointed governor of Mountain Province. Imagine mo kung walang picture. Di ba? Kasi mabilis pang kumuha ng picture in a snapshot. You can take a picture or several pictures. Di ba? Na kapag magsusulat ka, medyo mabagal. And in the case of remote areas, mahirap talaga na kumuha na o mag-jot down notes. No? Pero sa panahon na to, hindi madali, no, ang pagkuha ng pictures. Kailangan na tumigil ka sa loob ng ilang segundo para hindi maging blurry yung image or images. Okay? Yan. Alright. Next, other elements. Are there other elements like images, colors, lines, perspectives or milieu, for example, in the picture that would help you to understand it. Ito ay yung picture ng Taft Avenue. No? Yun yung nandoon sa ating publication material. And to the left is uh, the Metropolitan Theater. To the right is Intramuros. No? Ito ay papunta sa area ng Manila City Hall na hindi pa uh, wala pa siyang orasan dito, no? At kita mo din yung old building which is now the National Museum of the Philippines. At sa gitna, no? Sa gitna, ito ay from the area of Loton, no? Sa gitna, makikita mo ang mga electric powered na mga tram car. Okay. So yung itsura mismo ng mga image na makikita mo dyan ay historical fact. Alright. Now, when we, alright, ayan, what do pictures provide? Usually pictures provide the progress or development of certain individuals, institutions, or places in concrete and vivid images. Okay. What can this be? Ano ito? Ano kaya ito? Huh? Okay. And then, oops. Ayan. All right. And then, that one. So clearly, it is the Araneta Coliseum. Yan. Okay. Uh, the Araneta Coliseum, which was constructed in 1958 and opened to the public in 1960. So kita mo yung mga sasakyan, yung mga private car noong 1960. No? At kita mo ay hindi pa sementado ang lugar na yan. In just half of a century, of 5 decades, no? Napaka-develop ng lugar na yan. Okay. Alright. Okay. Alright. Now, ito ay nakikita ninyo sa mga libro, no? And a lot of individuals, in fact, there were scholars who were misled by this picture. Okay, this one shows Governor General William Howard Taft while riding a carabao. Yan. Kaya lang, at by the way, ito ay nagbibigay ng impression na very kind at accommodating si Governor Taft sa mga Filipino. Pero ang picture na ito ay peke. Okay, fake ito na picture. Alright, kasi ang totoo ay ito. Alright? Siya ay nakasakay sa malaking kabayo at nung siya ay maging presidente, imagine mo, no? Yung picture na ito, which was taken during his stint as Governor General, na mas nauna sa kanyang pagiging presidente, ay lumalabas na mas nauna ang pagkaka-develop ng picture na yan. Samantalang ito was taken when he became the President of the United States of America. O, kita mo, no? Alright. Now, nahihirapan yung mga empleyado ng White House kasi dahil sa kanyang katabaan at kabigatan ay kailangan nilang maghanap lagi ng malaking kabayo. No? At binibiro siya ng kanyang mga cabinet member kapag katapos na mag-horseback riding kung buhay pa ba yung kabayo. Kung kaya during his time, no, ang White House ay nag-umpisa na magkaroon ng mga automobile, no? O ito ay officially nagagamitin ng kanilang presidente. Okay. Now, paano natin masabi na ito ay peke? Yan, tignan natin. Oops. Ayan. Okay. Yan. Comparison number 1, the original picture is not clear. Okay. While the fake picture is of course clearer than the original, no? Okay, and both have the same image of William Howard Taft. Okay, paano kaya mas naging malinaw yung peke na picture kaysa sa doon sa original? Okay, and then ayan, kung titignan mo, okay, the cord of the Carabao, ayan, is not placed in its nose. Na parang kabayo lang ito, di ba? Na dapat nandun siya sa kanyang nose. Okay. Di katulad doon sa kabayo na talaga nakapaikot doon sa kanyang, di ba, nose yung at leather yung ginamit. So, yung picture na ito ay peke, na? Okay. Paano ginawa ang editing dito? Okay. Now we have words of caution. No? We have something to be reminded at. Editing of photographs began in the 1860s or 1870s. However, the technology did not come immediately to the Philippines. So far, there is no known record yet of photo editing during those years in the country and even beyond. No, okay. The first photo to be edited was that of President Abraham Lincoln, who stood behind his wife. Itong nasa kaliwa, akala mo multo na nakatayo doon si Abraham Lincoln, pero ang ginawa ay manually, no, binura ang kanyang image. Kaya dito sa shoulders ng kanyang asawa, left and right shoulders, kita pa din yung pinagburahan ng kanyang mga kamay. Okay. Uh, the editing was thought to have happened in 1870 or earlier. Uh, at the right side naman, you have there the younger younger version or appearance of Mrs. Lincoln, of course, so, in her younger years. Due to the lack of available technology, editing of photographs was done manually. Ito po yung nasa right side ang ginagamit, no, na pag-edit ng mga picture. By means of pasting images together. Moreover, early editors had to rely likewise on the use of available tools like ink, paint, and airbrushes. Kaya kapag ka ginugupit, halimbawa, yung nung ginupit yung image ni William Howard Taft, na kitang-kita doon yung bakat nung scissors, kaya kailangan mag-apply ng ink doon. Kaya kailangan ng maliit na brush para mag-apply ng ink doon at yun na rin ang kanilang ginawa, no, yung I mean opportunity para gawing mas malinaw yung picture. Okay. Editors who tried to enlarge photographs had to do some adjustments like brightening or darkening various parts. The editing of photographs using computer programs through the first personal computers were made initially in the 1980s. With the release of the first version of Adobe Photoshop in 1987, editing of photographs started to become a common practice. Since then, the word Photoshop has become the common usage of people to mean an edited photo through the use of the software. The first mobile application photo editor called Photolier photo editor was released in 2011 in Apple Store. Okay, so 2011 lang. Uh, After 10 years, no, sakalang, I mean, ang bilis, no, ng talagang pag-develop ng mga application at napaka-sophisticated ang mga ginagamit natin ngayon sa pag-i-edit ng mga picture. Subsequently, released applications were made for other mobile operating systems, editing of photographs and sharing them through smartphones and tablets can be done in these applications easily. Before 1886, photographs were usually black and white until uh, Levi Hill, a Baptist minister in New York, produced apparently colored images through the enhancement of pigments. Okay. The first colored photograph without the aid of any pigment or dyes was made in 1886 by a physicist and inventor named Gabriel Lippmann. Lippmann's contribution to photography earned him Nobel Prize in Physics in 1908. Pero syempre sa Pilipinas, hindi naman kaagad dumadating, no, dahil mga barko pa ang mga ginagamit para matransport ang technology, no. Mga taon ang inaabot bago makarating yan sa atin. Pinakamaaga na kung halimbawa ilang buwan lang ito. Okay. Now, what are the basic assumptions that we need to consider whenever we study photographs? First, black and white photographs are usually credible uh, because of the presumption that these photographs were taken at older times. As long as no tampering was made, photographs, whether black and white or colored, have strong credibility because they show motionless episodes of registries of the occurrence of supposed events. Third, before the invention of editing, photographs were usually credible as primary sources of historical information. And lastly, due to the prevalence of editing applications at present, careful scrutiny on the veracity of photographs must be made. The need for the help of experts might be necessary. Kaya nga, di ba, maliban kay Ed Kaluwag, si Jessica Soho ay kumukonsulta ng mga expert pagdating sa sound, sa video, at syempre sa pagdating sa mga photograph. Yan. With that, I am ending my presentation and I am now ready for your questions.
All right. So thank you, Sir Pascual. That was a very interesting and excellent talk. I was very uh, surprised by all the information. I think we also have some questions.
Yes,
Arturo?
yes, we do. So just a reminder for right now. So right now is the question period. If you have any questions, either type them in the chat or use the raise your hand function. Turn on your mic and camera if you'd like to, and then you could ask your questions directly to Sir Pascual. But for now, we already have some questions light up in the chat that were messaged to us via the chat. So I'll begin by reading those right now. So the first question that was asked was asking, are some of these photos readily or easily accessible, especially for academic / teaching / student use purposes? That Sir Pascal, your mic is muted.
Yes, they are available. Mayroon sa Pinterest, madami. At madami din if you are, for example, a member of Manila Nostalgia or Memories of Old Manila. Of course, they give the captions, pero you really have to verify, no, kung ang picture ba talaga ay hindi nabigyan ng maling date, tama yung date na nilagay, in other words, or tama yung description. Kasi minsan sa observation ko ay nagkakamali sa caption na nilalagay yung mga member ng mga page na yan sa Facebook. No? There are digitized photos available, for example, from digitized materials available at the website of the archives of the University of Michigan. Meron yan. Meron din from Spain. Other countries meron. All that you need to do is to be very painstaking in looking for these digitized materials. Madami sa net ang available.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I can also ask in relation to that before we go on, Arturo. So are these photos also are these available? Are these or are they copyrighted, or will this be different? Will these have different copyrights according sa institution?
Well, scholars have been using them, and I noticed that in the presentations I had before, national and international, these photos were just cited. Kailangan lang talaga na when you use them, naka-cite lang talaga. Oo, nakalagay yung source kung saan mo kinuha para wala namang problema.
All right.
So yeah, because especially within most academic contexts, as long as you do the proper sourcing, proper
Yes,
citing,
proper citation.
and accreditation of those pictures, then yeah, usually it's within the copyright law for them to be used. So yeah, just
Mhm.
do you do your due diligence as you use photos, and make sure to credit who the photo belongs to, and normally you'd be good.
All right. I think there's another question on the chat from MLS Belen. Uh, so there was already some chatter nga sa chat box, but regarding uh, kay President Lincoln and his wife, was that sanctioned by the White House regarding the altered photo? And what was the story behind it? I guess so that would be interesting to
Um,
understand.
I'm sorry, but I'm not yet very familiar with the story behind that. But my speculation is that they wanted to experiment on the possibility of eliminating the image of President Lincoln. I've been looking actually for the reason behind that, but I haven't stumbled upon it yet. My apologies. Pero yun nga, ang speculation ko ay kasi ang logic naman ay bakit naman nila yun gagawin at hindi naman gagawin ng dalawang yung first couple, no, by themselves alone, kung hindi ito ginawa halimbawa ng kanilang mga staff. Siguro ito ay parang experimentation lang on the possibility of having an edited picture.
That's interesting because JJ, you were the one who gave that talk about the erasing of photographs. Am I correct?
Yes. The photo that I cited, which is a pretty famous instance, was the picture of Joseph Stalin, where he erased one of his former close associates from a picture. But yes, basically it was the same technique, where they manually removed the individual in question from the picture. Although this happened, several
Way
years
after.
later, and the technique, the technique was a lot more refined, and
Mhm.
it was much more believable to believe that the individual was out of the picture or was never in the picture in the first place.
Yeah, because sometimes after the taking of the picture, they would come up with a disagreement with someone in the picture, so they wouldn't like that person would be in the photo any longer, so they would tend to erase the image of that person.
Yeah, that's especially if it began as an experimentation. But eventually there's a lot of social implications kung gagamitin itong mga techniques na ito.
Mhm.
That's a good idea. These are just techniques, but the practices are all depending doon sa social circumstances in which they are being used. Ang galing, nakakatuwa.
Mhm.
I think there's another question from
Yes. Yeah. So this next question was posed by Kate Lim, and she asked, in your analysis, how did you consider your own biases/context in the interpretation of photographs?
Okay, when we speak of historical context, we mean, all right, uh, the place or the space where the photo or the space of the subject of the photo, yung tinatawag natin negative space na makikita mo. Pangalawa is the prevailing practices, so, and traditions or culture that you can somehow have an impression with. And then lastly is yung perspective, okay, or the reason why the photo was captured. Kasi importanteng malaman natin yon, no? Kasi kinakailangan, remember, when we talk about history, we also talk about context. Kasi kung magtatanong lang tayo ng tungkol sa isang bagay, no, o when, what, where, we don't deal about history, rather we deal about trivia, no? At ang historical events kasi ay naka-confine sa konteksto. Kaya importante na malaman natin. Now, ang question ay, paano ba natin ang kino-contextualize, no? Halimbawa, if you were to look at the entirety of the photo, sa tingin mo ba, and in relation to other photos, ganun din ba yung yung mga image na makikita mo, yung atmosphere na makikita mo, yung types of object na makikita mo, yung pananamit na makikita mo, practices na makikita mo, ganun din kaya, no? And whenever you corroborate it with other photos, makikita mo yung mas strengthen mo yung reliability and therefore the credibility of the source at pwede mo na siyang gamitin. Kasi kailangan natin i-corroborate, no? And we can also corroborate photos with the descriptions coming from written narratives like diaries, personal accounts, no? Etc. So pwede nating i-corroborate doon. Pero sometimes it's the other way around, no? Yung mga narrative ang kino-corroborate sa mga photo kasi stronger ang photos as pieces of evidence. Dahil solidly kita mo talaga no, yung mga image na nandoon.
That's that's interesting concept na yung photographs. It's because we trust more what we see. So as primary context talaga siya. And yung interesting tong concept na ano yung credibility of the photos was more I guess mas pinapansin, and even up to now I guess yun yung naging standard na rin sa atin. It becomes an evidence base as soon as kunyari nakabangga ka, you go out and take photos, parang yun yung magiging primary source. And I have other questions regarding the concepts of historiography, photography, but I think there's also a lot of other questions. Sige.
Yes. Okay, yeah. So this next question is by Michael Angelo Cruz, and he wants to ask, first of all, he thanks you for the very insightful talk, and then he asks the question: is there or was there any instance in your experience and studies in which photography helped to resolve known historical controversies?
Okay. Historical controversies. Hindi pa nare-resolve. Ito ay ongoing pa lang. Nag-surface lang ito na controversy. Ito yung about the execution of Rizal. Yung picture ay, yung alam natin na picture ay sa kasalukuyan, dinidebate yon. So it is put into question ngayon yung picture na yon kung totoo ba talaga na yon yung picture na nakuha nung siya ay na-execute o hindi. Pero other than that, wala akong matandaan na merong na-resolve because of its controversial, the event's controversial nature. Wala pa akong matatandaan. Wala akong matandaan. But primarily, ang photos ay nag-strengthen ng when you speak, for example, of the shoes, the collection of Imelda Marcos as controversies, we can say na yung mga picture na kinuha doon ay, it would put to rest the controversy. Oo. Pero yung like at the time of the Spaniards, at the time of the Americans, wala akong matandaan.
So even then, there's still a discussion kahit na yung focus, kahit na pinaniniwalaan yung mga photographs, there's still going to be some controversy. I mean, considering itong kay, you mentioned yung kay Rizal about was he executed. So the main question there was he executed or tama ba?
Kung yun ba talaga yung picture na kinuha nung siya ay na-execute. Okay. And then another picture is, at ito ay nasa mga libro din, no? Showing, I just don't have the picture at the moment, showing Rizal. Yung meron siya dito na parang sablay, no, or sash, no? Kino-question din yon kasi it doesn't even resemble the physical, no, and the facial features of Rizal. And
Mhm.
yet others ascribe the photo na siya yun. Um, hindi hindi ito hindi ito matatawag na talagang picture kay Jose Rizal. Actually, it's the other way around. Yung picture ang nagiging controversy because it's proven to be not accurate at all. Uh,
Oh, okay. That it's proven not accurate, but
mm-mm.
people still accept it. Tama ba? Or not
Yes,
accurately. It is an old photograph. It's not edited, but it's not of Rizal. Tama
it's
ba?
not of Rizal, and yet there have been Filipinos who accepted that it was him. Maybe
Mm,
because yung question nga na hindi siya yun ay hindi pa siguro nila naririnig.
okay. So, okay. And that brings us around dun sa sa concept ng using yung historiography as a method when
Mhm,
it's being applied sa photographs or
mhm,
images. But I think there's still some other questions. I will come around it
Yeah.
later.
All right. So this next question is from MLS Belen, and they say, I noticed the different patina variations among the black and white photographs. Is this primarily attributed to the aids in oxidization of the paper, humidity, or mostly attributed to chemical agents used in the developing of the photo?
Um, parehas kasi nag-expire din yung chemicals, no? At siyempre, there are natural circumstances na talagang nakakapag-contribute doon sa pag-deteriorate din ng photo at minsan accidental pa nga kapag halimbawa natuluan ng iced tea, ng coffee. Siyempre, pagka pinunasan mo yun sa ngayon, mukhang walang epekto pero merong kahit paano after a certain period of time, no? Minsan yung ating mga nakalagay na mga picture sa ating mga album, kapag after a decade or so nagkakaroon ng moist, no? Dumidikit doon sa ano, sa plastic. Oo. Kaya yung iba ang ginagawa talaga nila ay pinapa-restore yung kanilang mga picture. Minsan naman kasi hindi mo alam yung quality ng pagka-develop ng picture. Kaya kahit na gumamit ka halimbawa ng mga paper, parang mga ah, page break o mga interval, no? Eh, dumidikit pa din yung picture. Depende kasi sa quality ng pagkaka-develop. Kaya before, naalala ko mas gusto marami magpa-develop sa Kodak kahit mas mahal kaysa Fuji, no? Yung mga ganong yung mga because siguro of quality, no? Yun.
Okay, thank you. And I think sort of follow-up question to that, which sort of tackles a similar issue. Uh, this question is posed by AG de Mesa. She'd like or they'd like to know your stance on colorizing black and white photos, and do you see any sort of um, issue with that, or do you think that that's okay? Yeah.
For me, it is okay because when you colorize black and white photo, you create another version of the photo. Hindi naman kasi nawawala yung original eh. You come up with another copy. No? Only that it's the colorized version. Para din makita nung titingin kung ano ba talaga yung color. Halimbawa, nung objects o kaya ng damit, di ba? Nung panahon na yan. But the thing is, di ba, again, we will boil down to one of the important canons talaga ng history, the question, no? How certain are we na ganun talaga yung color niya nung panahon na yon? Yun yung laging question ko kapag tumitingin ng colorized picture pero well apparently parang ano naman parang accurate naman pero pagka kasi gagamitin mo na and it would be read by people, it would be seen by people at mali pala, di you're going to miseducate a lot of people.
Merong naalala ko there was I read a paper regarding sa colorizing and their methods on how to colorize because they were looking through the tone of the black and white
Mhm.
color, so they and then they apply a formula to indicate kung ano yung possible colors that was there. So, but these are all just theories. To accept that this person was wearing red at that time ay siguro yun siguro isang caution dahil immediately when we look at the photographs, tama ka, we always think of these as primary, these are truths. But as we already know right now, photos can also be highly edited. What more yung mga old photos?
At minsan mas malinaw yung ibang picture kasi depende yon lalo pa kung halimbawa Spanish period or early American period, mas malinaw yung ibang mga black and white kasi depende doon sa kondisyon no nung lugar at halimbawa yung camera na kumukuha. Meron naman na malabo talaga because nga of the camera talaga o yung lugar.
So it's also the lighting then?
Yes,
Okay. All right. I think there's other questions. Huh?
Yes. Yeah, and then another follow-up question by AG de Mesa. She'd like to ask about hold on. Photos to resolve controversy. They use photos of Anastasia Romanov to identify her bone structure and cross-reference it to possible corpses, therefore finalizing that she's dead. So, it sort of, again, brings in another concept of photography as a tool, particularly a forensic tool. And, its use modern day, in crime scenes and making sure that, these tools are used, for the benefit of all is really, really interesting.
Sa case naman ni I don't know if it has been decided with finality na talagang hindi siya yon, no? Pero so far sa pagkakaalam ko ay hindi nga talaga walang nakaligtas according to records kasi walang nakaligtas but eventually later on may nakikling na hindi nga siya namatay. Well, yes, mahirap mahirap kasi nagagamitin mo lang yung picture in order to look at the bone structure of a person who died a long time ago without the intervention of exact science or I mean for example DNA pero ang problem ay meron bang nakuha halimbawa na DNA sample din kay Anastasia para 'di ba kung kanino i-corroborate yung DNA sample na makukuha sa kanyang bones. So mahirap na gagamitin mo yung photo at i-appropriate mo siya sa isang artifact or remains no na sasabihin mo na ito 'yon. Hindi siya definitive, mahirap.
Okay, thank you. And then another question by Vicente Olaibar Jr. He's asking that what are the purposes of editing photos at the time? So sort of referencing back to that Taft photo and that Lincoln photo. I guess he wants to sort of delve deeper into that question, although he did provide earlier some sort of reasoning, whether it be experimental, for personal reason, disagreement with the individuals in the photo. Were there any other reasons that you saw historically of why people were edited out of pictures?
Well, one reason that I saw ay yung tinatanggal dahil nakaaway na nila yung tao na yon after na makapicture nila. At grabe ang mga ideological no at mga principle ng mga tao noon. Halimbawa sa case ng Russia, napaka-ideological masyado ng mga tao. So mag-away lang sila doon sa ano na yan, tinatanggal ang mayroong ganung mga case. Nakalimutan ko lang isang picture sa coming from Germany naman na in-erase dahil doon. Pero other than that, wala kasi it was very difficult, very complicated task. dahil there were cases talaga na mahahalata katulad nung kay Lincoln, kay William Howard Taft, no, mahalata talaga.
And I suppose at that time it was still a new technology. So they were just, as you mentioned, they were just
Yes.
playing around with it. I mean, that's also it was part of the talks rin sa kanina pinag-uusapan that this is possibly yung concept ng memes. So parang people do it just because they can.
Yeah, and especially within those early times where the level of entry for photography and then even photo editing was quite high. You had to know the technical skills and concepts to do that. So yeah, it although it's seldomly used, you could like a lot of surrounding information of when that photo was taken can sort of fill in the gaps of why that happened in the first place, whether it'd be experimental, it be wanting to remove a person for disagreements or whatnot. But yeah, it's a really interesting dilemma and issue to sort of tackle within the history of photography.
Yes.
Actually, yung pinaka first picture, the one that I mentioned earlier, yung gumawa kasi nun ay hindi siya magaling mag-sketch, mag-drawing, mag-paint, kung kaya ang resort niya ay mag-invent na lang ng isang device na mag-produce ng exact image. Kaya eventually, yan, the oldest surviving photo was produced because of that.
Interesting.
Okay. Very interesting.
There's another question here. So I guess there's an interest regarding the concept of photos as primary data because there's a lot of questions regarding the changes of perspective as evidenced by photo. So there's a question here asking, has there been an instance when in book history, where history has been changed due to a recently released photo that was possibly kept for years?
Actually, yung paggamit ng photos as sources of information ay, in my opinion, parang emerging pa lang sa Pilipinas. Although there are scholars na the use of photos ay hindi widespread sa madaming mga tao. To certain historians, yes, they use photos, pero in the US, for example, in Europe, kaya nga na-coin yung term na historiography, no? Simply because of the use of photos and the other visual materials like film, documentary presentations,
Sorry, what's this
cartoon, historiography. Historio and then PHO. PY. Yeah, history of Poti.
All right. Okay.
The representations of historical events or events or episodes in vivid visual and filmic discourses. Yan. Sa atin, hindi pa malaganap talaga yung paggamit ng mga photo para patunayan ang mga pangyayari or i-rectify halimbawa yung error ng ating mga book. When I was being consulted by DepEd, hindi nagamit yung ganong klaseng for the instructional materials.
Okay. I think there's
but that would be a very interesting matter to consider, no, na the use of photos in strengthening historical claims and rectifying certain errors.
Well, considering that this practice has only been considering that photographs were only around for the past a little over 100 years in terms of extensive use. So the concept of using this as part of building a solid historiography is medyo bago pa rin. and that is also to considering that historiography using texts and diaries and everything was uh, largely debated and also refined over the years pa, diba?
Uh,
So,
yeah, I guess so. Kasi what we have achieved so far is the writing of researches and books
mm,
about representations of history in visual and filmic discourses.
mhm,
Yun pa lang. Pero yung halimbawa, sinabi na gagamitin na ito in order to rectify errors in our textbooks,
mhm.
wala pang ganun na initiative.
In the Philippines.
Yes,
Or-
yes.
Okay. But, okay, interesting siya. And that's also what I wanted to ask when regarding sa historiography. Was there already a, a standard regarding the use of or researches or papers that uses that focused on the use of photographs or editing of photographs, verifying who were the legitimate supposedly sources in building a good a good source for arguing on an event in
Mhm.
history. So that's a good point. Um, I think my question.
Yes, and then
Oh, sorry. Yes. Go.
yes, there's
Arturo.
another question here in the chat that was directed at me, and they were asking what was the first use of photographs in Filipino newspapers? Do you know what Filipino newspapers?
Okay. I'm not familiar of the period as to when photographs were used kasi until um, the the American period ay ginagamit ang mga cartoon but no, I'm sorry but hindi ako familiar kung when unang ginamit yung mga pictures sa mga newspaper.
Okay, thank you. I might have missed it earlier in the chat, but I think there was a clarification on copyright law by who was this? By Alan Torres Camba, and
Maybe we
yeah,
can call on him. He
yeah,
Can I?
wanted to.
Yeah,
yes,
hello. Can you hear me?
yes, yes, Bob.
Yes.
Yeah. So just a clarification on the copyright law, because I think Mom Anna a while ago had a good point about asking on the how about like if there's a copyright infringement and as far as using the photos. When you use a photo, not because you're citing it, uh, it gets you off of the copyright infringement. Now, it depends how you're using it because if you're using it for academic reason, if you're using it in a transformative use, like for example in Section 107 for Copyright Act in the U.S., where the Republic Act number 8293 from the Philippines is based on the copyright in the U.S. I think this was during President Ramos. Um, we are allowed to do a transformative use, but then not because kung nakikita natin kung minsan nilalagay nila kung they would take a picture and they would say CTTO, credit to the owner,
Yeah.
not because you do that you are free from the copyright infringement. No, it only frees you from plagiarism,
Uh-huh.
but the people who owns that picture can still charge you of copyright infringement, especially if you post it in your Facebook, if you use it for your book, if you use it on a magazine. That's why we really have to be careful as far as using these photos that we get online. Uh, Not only just because we cannot trust, even if we do cite it, that the citation that they had in the first place is right or wrong, right? We don't know if it's wrong, then we also would be wrong.
Uh-huh.
So we have to be really careful in using this, especially at this age wherein we see so much photos that are available for us to use, not because they're out there, we can use them.
Uh-huh.
That's just my advice.
I think what we can do about that is when the photo is so rare that it cannot just be simply found anywhere. I think it's better if you contact the person who posted it and trace as to who the rightful owner is, and then you ask permission from the owner.
Yes, and there's also a way around that, where especially the copyrighted material can fall off the copyright claim once it's a certain amount of years that they are actually copyrighted.
Mhm.
Even music, music is only in a certain amount of years that they're still in a copyright. That's why like the one that what they called his name, Easy Mill. What's his name? Ismail is the one that kumanta ng he was able to use the Easy Mail. He was able to use the I guess the Pandango sa Ilaw music because it already fell off of the copyrighted claim. It's he can already use it. I'm still not sure if that's really the case, but I believe that's really what happened. That's why we cannot file any claim on the music because it already went off of the copyrighted terms.
I see.
So yeah, I mean, we like I said, it's important that we actually look like what Sir MacDonald Pascual said. We really have to look deeper into this the source of the picture, not only
Mhm.
what we see in the internet, but actually trace who owns the picture before we
Yes,
use it.
that's true. And I think there's coming off from that trend, there's a question here from MLS Belen again. So, credibility of images captured in photos becomes more of a challenge now with the advent of digital photography and apps to enhance or alter such. So, do any of you have any advice how one can have a discerning eye to the images presented? And I guess this also jumps off from the concept of copyright trend because people will with new technologies, people immediately
Yes.
can immediately transform these photographs depending on the agenda that they may have.
Well, usually academicians are not that expert when it comes to discerning whether the picture has been tampered or not. There is only but a suspicion. But what we can do is, well, we can of course ask the opinions of experts.
So I guess we also have forensic photographers, as was mentioned earlier. There should be some people who are professionally trained to look into that, I guess.
Yes, those who are good in IT at the same time in images.
Yes. And even mga graphic designers, because they know what they're doing, they also know what to look for
Hmm.
then when looking at edits. So that's an interesting thing. There's an addition here as an FYI. So La Solidaridad was the first anti-Spanish newspaper during the period of Rizal. But in the case of using photos in newspapers, the Americans used lithography or woodcut caricatures to illustrate newspapers. So the Philippine Free Press of 1908 is the oldest publication in the Philippines, and it was founded and published by an American. All right. Uh, I guess I think there's a lot of questions as well because this is an interesting concept. The photographs, pictures are so it is practically in our everyday lives. There's a lot of practices to you in using it. There's arguments about ethics in using it, especially and we all know, as I guess there's a lot of historians here, that history pictures are very helpful when it comes to visualizing or to telling us about what was happening in the past. And in some ways, I guess it also evokes a bit of different emotions rather than from reading and hearing about it or talking about it. Pictures can have an added or can also change perceptions in terms of discussions sa mga tao. I was particularly interested. I guess this as an ending for our talk. I wanted to ask one that why was disasters one of the initially most photographed events in early Philippine history.
Simply because there had been studios that had been established there were already photographers in the Philippines at that time, so they could
Yeah.
capture whatever was happening, especially the disasters.
Did they think of this as a current event disaster thing? Because if I were a lot of people when they were initially taking photos, usually scenery. So yung concept is coming immediately from a painting. So everyday life, everyday
Uh-huh.
portraits of people, but to immediately tackle yung disasters,
Disaster, yes.
flooding,
Uh-huh.
earthquakes,
Uh-huh.
that can already be argued as a part of journalism.
Photojournalism at that time.
Yeah.
It was attempted to be kept for future purposes.
Okay. So it was really for as part of for building uh his stories that
Yes,
were current
it was
during
for
that time.
record keeping.
That's already a very good concept. Basically kasi wala akong alam about sa histories of painting or art, and usually when you look at art nga ay yun nga puro landscape pictures ng mga tao, but to go to photography and not transition from the same subjects but to immediately go towards the now, that is disasters or
Mhm.
other things then, or the everyday lives of urban realities. Medyo nakakatuwa siyang isipin. And where are there finally with this, are you going to tackle videos in the future? Maybe.
Oh, I have presentations also on
Okay.
caricatures and videos. By the way, regarding photography, Felix Laureano, the first Filipino photographer, kasi siya ay taga-Panay, and eventually he went to Spain and na-publish niya yung collection niya ng photographs, um, called Recuerdos de Filipinas, which he dedicated to his friend Juan Luna, no? Doon nga siya nakapag-asawa sa Spain, kaya makikita mo talaga na pati sa photography, no, yung taga-alta sosyedad lang talaga din ang nakikinabang kasi sila lang din nag-hire ng services na talaga ng mga photographer. Pero kung mayroon mang nakukuhanan, halimbawa mga ordinary men and women, ang mga ito ay out of curiosity and then for record purposes. And then, like what I said, yung collections niya ng photographs ay na-publish into a book called Recuerdos sa Pilipinas.
So I guess that's already people who might be interested, we can look into that material. And I think there's a lot of also travelogues that also has photos, pero that was at the early 1900s na. So thank you for all of the resources as historians and as archaeologists and people who are interested in the past and how it will affect our current events. This talk really highlighted the importance of pictures, of photographs in terms of building narratives. So we're excited to see more, and maybe we can invite you again next time for
My
to give
pleasure.
give a talk on videos naman or something else
Like
about
caricatures, political
caricature.
cartoons.
Yes, that would be really great. And especially, I've read some articles regarding the World War II na may mga caricatures. So
Caricature, yeah. A
yeah,
lot, a lot.
so that would be an interesting talk. So with that, we will formally end this talk. Thank you, Sir McDonald Pascual, for
My
that
pleasure.
very good, amazing talk. I was so interested. I filled up a lot of pages in my notebook to
Thank you.
ask questions. For next week, we're still communicating with the speaker who will be coming from ANU. She will be talking about bioarchaeology of either Southeast Asians, the statures of Southeast Asians, or the analysis of the Viking neonates that she looked into. So just wait for the titles for give from a talk that will be given by Miss Britta Van Tiel from ANU next week. So, but for now, thank you so much, Sir Donald Pascual. Thank you as well to Arturo, who co-moderated. Thank you to Sherrenne, the Amboy, who invited our speaker for today. And thank you to all the students who attended and from people who also attended from everywhere. Please like the BINALOT Facebook page if you are interested to get more information for next week. So thank you everyone and have a safe week, especially for those who are celebrating the quiet days of Metro Manila. So thank you.
Thank you.
Stay negative.